Harvest Moon Sunshine Islands. This game reminds me of Magical Melody a little with the character designs and 3D graphics. But it's got two major problems that are a constant annoyance. The tool upgrade system, and the new weather system. At least the game lets you use the buttons and control pad to name things if you so choose. And do anything in general. There's a reason I'm skipping Island of Happiness, which is entirely touchscreen controlled. Another immediate improvement over Harvest Moon DS is that the text scrolls much faster, like it should. Occasionally I feel like it pops up too fast and I press A so early that I end up missing what the villager was trying to say. With slow text, the game would be more boring. I'm glad time is back to freezing indoors, but I shouldn't have to compliment that. The premise of the game is that the sunstones are missing, and finding them raises the various islands which were magically sunk. Remember how Magical Melody you had a similar concept with collecting notes and there was a note screen in the main menu? You could highlight the various grayed out notes, and even if you didn't have a note yet, the title of it gave you at least a hint about how to get it. I haven't been able to find anything of the sort here. This game copies the note achievement system with a better reward for getting them because you don't have to get half of them to get anything. But you still end up feeling like you need a guide to find out how to get a lot of them. I ended up finding out I could get 2 sunstones from befriending a bachelorette long enough on my own. One of them is received long after the first one. This immediately creates the immersion-breaking plot hole of the fact that the villagers are hoarding sunstones to themselves for no reason. Every time you get a sunstone from someone, the villager shows awareness that your character has been looking for them. So why don't the villagers all bring the sunstones they have to Meadow Island and raise all the islands they can? And they're never busy, they always just stand around or walk around. Wouldn't it make a lot more sense for it to magically appear in front of you then? Thankfully, sunstones are easy enough to come by that by the time I found out I could get sunstones by befriending random villagers, I had already raised plenty of islands. There's always some boring farm music no matter what season it is when you're on Ranch Island. It's supposed to vary it up with new music everywhere every season. Apparently Tree Tranquility does the same thing. It even wasted development time on having new music for every single store you go to. Why the hell do they play the same boring music whenever you go into a pet stable or barn or coop? It restarts it from the beginning every time you leave, encouraging you to play the game on mute. Mushroom Island has good music, but it also changes music whenever you go to Mystic Islands. The soundtrack is forgettable and pointless. I don't feel like I missed out by playing it on mute most of the time. This game confuses you by replacing the fatigue meter with a fullness meter. Obviously, if it runs out, that's bad. But shockingly, your character outright faints because of it, even if you still have stamina left. Another lame downgrade. At least the stamina and fullness meters are always on screen, that's great. And they take up a tiny amount of it. It's weird that they aren't green like they're supposed to be though. I prefer to see actual numbers as well as meters, so it could tell me exact numbers when it comes to tools and eating stuff, but whatever. Your fullness meter gets better after your character eats. This is like forcing a challenge run of a Harvest Moon game on you, where you have to eat. One of the biggest main problems with the game when I started out is that there's no way to permanently increase the size of your stamina meter. Sure, you can wear an accessory to temporarily increase it, but imagine the annoyance of it always taking up one of your 4 item slots. It's manageable, but it's lame enough that I don't even forgive it for being tolerable. I'm glad there are 4 item slots that you can press R to cycle between now. But it's always bothered me that you can't simply press L to go to the left, and instead L puts away an item. You can also tap any item slot to immediately switch to it. I don't like getting fingerprints on my screen or having to get out the stylus. At least you don't constantly have the stylus out like in the other DS games. But I feel like it's a lot faster to play DS, where you can just touch any part of the rucksack and equip it in seconds. Maybe that was the best inventory system. Pressing R to switch to an item automatically as you hold it over your head. Sometimes I wish I always had to press Y to do that instead of it being forced on my character. Because if I just want to go all the way to a tool past the item, my character is going to waste my time getting out the item first. Foraging is broken because if you don't pick up the stones, branches, and weeds around town, they'll eventually get so plentiful that nothing you want will spawn. Shouldn't there be a town weeder, realistically? Because the game commits the criminal crime of not having a way to replenish your stamina and fatigue for free from the start of the game, because it has the audacity to not have a hot spring at all, you end up with barely any stamina to do lumbering by the end of the day after all the work you had to do. It really is a game of mostly downgrades. On the bright side, the game doesn't have you need to press down before you can go to bed like in Tree Tranquility, so sleeping is faster. You only have lumber to use for buildings, meaning that stone is only good for a gift for Ganon. Yes, that's the name of the lumberjack, and it's amusing that they did that. Somehow Nintendo didn't get mad at them because it's one letter off from Ganon. I'm assuming that lack of a stone and golden lumber option for buildings means that your barn and coop can't be destroyed anymore by bad weather. But then you get to the toolbox, fridge, and cabinet. Because God forbid they call it a shelf again. And apparently you can upgrade them. Because having them have the maximum amount of space from the start like in all of the earlier games would be good. Yet another way to just cheaply pad out how long it takes to buy everything. To the point where I didn't do it because it would have taken years. I would have fully upgraded them, but because there's other material options for them, all the way up to Mythic Stone. And the game makes no indication that it'll keep the amount of extra screens I gave the toolbox or whatever after I change the material. I haven't upgraded them at all, because even one upgrade with Mythic Stones costs too much. It took me forever to learn that I could hold down on an item and drag it over to the bin to ship all of it at once. But here we get another one of the biggest problems of the game. Every item has a redundant freshness ranking, and really redundant size ranking, and some other ranking too for quality. Wouldn't the quality be the size ranking? Because of this, every single time you get a new item, it goes into a separate slot in your bank. The second I learned about this, I was horrified. Imagine what this does to mining and foraging. This is the kind of thing that should have been fixed in the beta phase of the game. What's the point if they don't actually look bigger with a bigger size meter? I hate when I end up filling up all of my item slots because I've been mining and still want to continue. And I have to go into the menu and drag the various items into each other. And every single item in the game has a letter rank, including fodder. And if most of what I have of a type of item is a lower grade than what I'm dragging it into, I'll end up with a bunch of D rank or B rank items because they fuse ranks together. I never liked that when you try to buy something, the menu takes a second to show up. You can notice a delay to the point of selecting the wrong option. It feels like the general store doubles as the blacksmith shop of this game. But it saves me time, so what am I complaining about? At least it's unique that the blacksmith is a kid prodigy this time. It's also confusing that you can't order makers while you're at this place. You have to talk to the son of the general store owner of all people to equip wonderful stones to your tools. You can also combine several wonderful pieces together to make a new wonderful. You get those pieces as a consolation prize for losing a festival. Why can't he always be in the shop? Sometimes he's just outside, later in the day. Which I feel is only because he's a kid. It means it's not worth the novelty value of him being a kid. Well, it's cool that the series is giving more of a use to the wonderful stones. The unnecessary overhaul to the tool upgrade system is easily one of the biggest problems with the game. And one of the two factors that eventually caused me to just use an action replay full time. Which always reflects poorly on the game's playability. You can't permanently upgrade tools in this game, because that'd be common sense. To further complicate things, every tool has a specific amount of wonderful slots instead of infinite. And your starting tools don't have any wonderful slots. You have to sell them all to the general store owner first and buy new versions of the tools to be able to upgrade them 3 times. That's a waste of your time, isn't it? If you happen to get an Indigo Wonderful, you can increase the amount of tool slots. But you can't equip more than 8 to a tool. You can't equip 10 of any particular Wonderful to any tool. Each Wonderful has its own unintuitive effect. It's very hard to memorize which effect the red one and the blue one have. One of them increases your tool range horizontally. When I started out the game, it at least took until the first fall for me to give up on the system entirely. I had to water 3 squares for each crop square, then go all the way to Charlie every time once a day to get him to have another stone equipped so that I could water 2 rows ahead at once and not one. That's lame. They just do everything possible to make it suck. Orange Wonderfuls increase the amount of an item you get from a tool by 1 each. Yellow ones increase the strength of the tool, making the brush relieve more stress. Green Wonderfuls, when used twice in a tool, make it not deplete any stamina, and when used once, halve the amount of stamina you lose from them. The game would have been so much better if you could have bought huge amounts of Wonderfuls. Why in the world can you barely buy any from him? I guess not having enough Wonderfuls is my own fault. But 1, the crop festival is only 1 random crop at a time be its theme. 2, the game never told me that the prize for winning any festival would be a random Wonderful. That's not intuitive because it's a new type of prize. The color is even random. That's how unfair it is. For all you know, you'll be stuck with the most useless purple Wonderful that gives you money every time you use a tool. If I had been told that was the prize for winning crop festivals, I'd have entered the first season, because even by the first year, I can still get A rank crops consistently. What's so hard about simply letting me go to the mine and get a bunch of mithril to upgrade all my tools? Granted, when you put a Wonderful on a tool, it upgrades instantly, and the experience system is gone. But who cares compared to all the other problems? I'd take uncursing the cursed tools over this. At least it's a permanent upgrade. And at least it's a lot faster to cheat to get a mythic tool to your rucksack instead of getting a billion Wonderfuls. Watering a lot of stuff took twice as long as it should. But I was putting up with that to humor the game, until the broken weather system finally made itself clear by the fall, where suddenly I noticed that my yams were all dying. After all the effort I had to put into watering them. I had to look it up online. Each crop gathers up sun points and water points every day. At least they fixed the problem from Island of Happiness, where cloudy days don't give you sun points. What the hell was that about? And you can see when you're buying seeds that some crops require less of sun and water, and some require more, and some are normal. I can understand why a few people would find this fun. It's certainly interesting to talk about. But why would they think that overcomplicating the game, making it more stressful, would be a fun idea? Why would I want to memorize this for every crop? Maybe I made a mistake by picking the yams, but the yams are always the best cash crop of the fall. Of course I picked them. Not having to water certain crops as much sounds fun. But it's not like the crop description saying less or more instantly told me at a glance what it was all about. There's a reason I didn't learn about the weather system until the fall. You're not put into the habit of actually paying attention to those particular descriptions. It should have said, water every other day, or it's better for it to get sun every other day. It should have said stuff like, water every other day, or water twice as much. Maybe it would be more fun to just plant crops that you only have to water every other day. I bet it'd take longer to buy all the marriage requirements. I guess that's a benefit to needing a certain island race from Sunstone to get married. That it would take so long to do that it compensates for taking longer to buy everything. At least the best watering can is better than the one in Tree Tranquility. Every time you use it fully charged up at its best, you have to go back and refill the water until you eventually crack and use enough Wonderfuls on to make it so that you don't have to refill it at all anymore. I love that you can do that. But because I can only water so much of a field with one charge up, I have to learn to not plant crops at all in certain vertical roads of the field. Because if I do, I won't have anywhere to stand if one area is taken, because you can't walk on crops anymore. And if I use my watering can legitimately, it'd take all day in-game to water every crop. There's arbitrarily an extra weather called very sunny that shouldn't have been in the game because some crops die with too much sun. The definition of fake difficulty is a problem that's not your fault that you can't do anything to avoid. That's a bit of realism that I don't want, game. Especially when the game doesn't have a way to automatically keep track of the stats of your crop squares. You'd literally have to resort to a spreadsheet for them to do this and mark it down. And if you're thinking that you can just reload your file to the previous day and sleep again to get a different weather, like would be common sense to program, you're wrong. Because the game regrets back to the earlier primitive 8-bit games, where it's predetermined in advance when a blizzard or typhoon is going to happen. The game determines the weather 6 days in advance. That's so lame! You'd have to do nothing but sleep for 6 days and then write down what the weather's going to be like to know it, and then reload to change it. Cheating is how you fix games that are poorly designed and broken. It wouldn't be so bad if you were allowed to have greenhouses on your farm from the beginning. Then you'd never have to deal with the weather system. The weather system could just be an extra challenge for growing crops on public property. No good Harvest Moon game has you go, oh no, the weather screwed me over, without it being a typhoon. Every single day can screw you over. At least you can still go into shops and use them after 6 PM on festival days. It's a long overdue change that took me months to learn about because the game never tells you about it. Every time I unlock an island, I get reminded of 2 annoying problems. First, the game forces you to watch a boring, unskippable cutscene that drags out too long, where you see the ocean and the island slowly rises from it. It's a miracle all the grass on island isn't dead from being drowned in the ocean after being raised up. But whatever, I guess the island was protected by an air bubble of magic. Why did the sunstone scatter away again? The second thing that sucks about unlocking an island is that you have to pay for a bridge to be built to it every time. That always baffles me. This is already a game where I can magically raise an island just by getting sunstones to an island and seeing a harvest right appear to me. I'd expect the bridge to the island to magically show up too at that point. Even when reading out the script, I'm surprised by this. Instead, the game pads out the amount of time it takes to buy everything in it. It always feels arbitrary and mean that I have to pay to build a bridge. You can easily get sunstones by pressing A in certain parts of the level design. And sadly, you can't see those sunstones until you actually press A and get them. Because fake difficulty. It requires looking up a guide to find them. You can also get sunstones by doing things that you would have done anyways, which takes forever. Most of the islands are profitable, like Greenhouse Island, and the greenhouse isn't big enough. A lot of the islands are good moneymakers for your character, so there's a genuine incentive to raise them, even if it does come off as a downgrade because previous games didn't have land masses that you couldn't get to that were great moneymakers. You also need to pay to get a greenhouse built after unlocking Greenhouse Island, which also feels like a dumb surprise. It's already bad enough it costs like 500,000 gold to make a greenhouse, and a dumb amount of money to put in a watering hole in the place, and a similar price to that to put a pedestal for a sun in there. That's lame because the greenhouse came with the pedestal and watering hole in DS, but at least the suns are not in some arbitrary mine you have to look up. They're only available after buying the greenhouse, so you don't know to look there at first. And they each cost a few thousand G's of money. It's cool that you can pay to have another sun in the greenhouse to increase the growth speed of your crops. At least in DS, the greenhouses were in the basement of your home, not north of your barn on a separate island. DS gave me the ability to have 3 greenhouses of different seasons from each other. You can still throw away an item and accidentally litter in this game though. The first time, and thankfully the only first time, the screen went black for no reason and I saw a text box telling me that someone trusts me less now. First off, why doesn't the game just tell me it's the Harvest Goddess right away? Why doesn't she tell me? And I can only assume that the reason she trusts me less is that she dickishly sent the knowledge that I littered to them telepathically. I don't understand why she cares when, if she knows everything, she'd know that I littered by accident because I was either not close enough to the feeding stall, which eventually caused me to only ever put stuff in the stall by moving north up to the stall, or I littered because I was trying to give a gift to a villager that's programmed to be constantly walking around in an annoying arbitrary path. Villagers have never been this annoying to give gifts to before. It better be true that only one villager loses affection with you for it, because that'd be a great improvement for once. Like the fact that you can tap villagers to give gifts to them. At least the game lets you put extra feeding stalls in your barn that keeps feeding them the next day if they're not eaten to get around typhoons. But I still don't want to be cheated out of doing the day and lose crops, so I still won't put up with typhoons. Typhoons aren't my fault unless I don't cheat. And sadly, once you have the max amount of chickens, having extra feeding stalls to deal with typhoons is no longer an option. I hate that the teleport stone doesn't teleport you directly to doors or specific areas like in the previous games. A stone that merely teleports you to the entrance of an island only saves you a few minutes in-game. It's even based on which entrance you used last. So if you warp to Ranch Island from Link Island, you wasted your time because you ended up on the northern part of Ranch Island. I wish the items in the teleport menu were in intuitive order. It takes a while to notice Link Island's an option because Ranch Island is the first one, and it's a northern island. Even Friends of Mineral Town had me able to look at the world map and choose my location based on that. Can you believe this is a remake? Because you'd think they would have fixed a lot of the problems.